So again, thanks for joining us. So again, my name is Tom Sternad. Thanks for joining us. I'm the lead digital artist of the Creator Space, and we're continuing our journey of the masterclass in cinematography. We'll be looking at lighting. Again, I think there's a great wealth of the YouTube videos, our YouTube channel, tbmcs.ca. If you go to that, you'll be able to find a lot of great videos on cinematography, digital cinema, all the concepts that we've been doing so far. And on that note, there's a lot of great resources that we've established and shown and demonstrated. So what we're trying to do now is kind of show more of the effects or the finals. So I want to show more examples after I talk about some of the theories. We'll look more of the examples. And the idea is here that this can complement what's already available on our YouTube channel in terms of showing the exact how-to. But again, we're always trying to look at more of the why. Not just the how, but the why. Because we can all just learn technical and go through that kind of process. But we want to think about why are we doing things and what are we trying to achieve. At the basis of cinematography and lighting is, at its root is that we need light to expose. So without any kind of lighting, we won't be able to expose. So that's really important that we can, light and we can expose and, we can see the subject, the images, and so on. So without light, we can't really achieve cinematography. And there's low light cameras and stuff, but the point is that it's still called low light. It's not called no light. I think that's a real something that I want to clarify, is that sometimes we think, okay, we have a really high ISO or sensitivity of the sensor of the camera, so we can shoot in like darkness. No, you still need light. The idea behind low light is that you can use things like street light, or you can use things like interior cabin lights for a car that have low light, but they still have light. So light is an essential tool of everything for cinematography, but also if you think about light as, what changes how we live and what happens on the day. If it's a sunny day, we might feel happier. If it's a cloudier day, we might feel a little bit more down or not wanting to do too much right away. So think of cinematography in that same way, is that the moods that the light can achieve, but the light as a source is our core ingredient in cinematography, because without it, we don't have an image. So that's, I think, a good way to look at that. So we're going to look at lighting for video, type of lights, color temperature, 3-point lighting. What is this? And then I'm going to show like demos in terms of, what can this look like in production. So we're going to look at more of those demos and that kind of an avenue. So lighting for video. So in digital video, what you see is what you get. And the digital monitor essentially lets you see what your image is. There's no delay with getting the film developed. In the past, you would shoot on a film camera, and then it would get there'd be an issue, and you'd find out, oh no, this was too dark, and so on. But now what you see is what you get. So really, if it doesn't look good as you're filming it, then that's what you're filming. So consider fixing that, right? So if it doesn't look good right off the bat, you want to really think about, how do you make it look good? And how do we fix things? So that's, I think, really important, is that the monitor, what you see is what you get. I can't stress that enough. So you can use any type of light, but the key is to use lights that don't flicker. And that's what we have available, and what I'm even using today is LED lights that are available through the library. So our library partners on this project, so we have the Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, Wasaga Beach Public Library, and we have lights available at the Blue Mountains Public Library and Wasaga Beach Public Library. So we have a few panels of these nice square LED lights that can be used to light and to create your lighting design. They're LED, there's low heat, and they're bicolor, so they have both the ability to be tungsten and daylight. What does that mean? We will soon learn more about what that means. Okay, so some lights are not designed for video, and those will flicker. So video is always recording, so it's not like it can just be an instant image. So I think that's a big difference between photography and video. So with photography, you can have, spots, and you can, work it in that way. But in video, it's the idea is that, it's continuous. So you need lights that are always on. I think that's really important. Lights that are always on. That could be, again, household lights. A lot of lights that we have work very well with video, but a lot of lights will not work well. what kind of lights, I always like to give some insight into what kind of problematic lights have I seen in the last few years. So one of the big problems I find challenges sometimes in, kind of theatrical lighting that, or some venues, smaller venues, there's kind of low cost LED lights for, music concerts and things like that, and theatrical lighting. But what happens is some of these are non-dimmable, or they might be dimmable, but what happens when they get dimmed, their frequency actually changes because they're not designed for film. So film lights, when you're dimming them, they actually don't change their frequency. They're just being dimmed in terms of the luminosity of it, the lumens. So the other lights, sometimes the lower cost things, they'll actually be changing their frequency. They're lowering their frequency. It changes the frequency, and then it causes a synchronization issue with the camera. And then what you can end up is typically what we used to see in television sets, you'd have like a bar going down a television set, and that would be much a similar problem, is that that bar could be going down, but it's now you see a bar on a wall of it going down with like a light that's traveling down, causing an issue. And sometimes you don't see it for a while. And really, really crucial, no matter what, is if you're using available light somewhere, to go and test the situation. Bring your camera that you're going to be filming with there, and get some test shots and make sure it works. Because sometimes you get an unpleasant surprise, like, oh no, it doesn't work. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well today, in terms of how to fix it. One of the simplest solutions is to open their shutter angle. So right now we work at usually 180-degree shutter angle. That's what you're watching with me now. So you're seeing me through a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K. So this is essentially, the same camera you're getting through the library partners. And the default is 180 degrees shutter angle. The shutter angle acts like a virtual spinning wheel, and just exposing basically like half of every frame of light. So it's exposing everything twice, and it's giving that image of the cinematic kind of flicker that we're used to, that kind of motion, that things are a little bit maybe jagged, a little bit blurred at times. And that's kind of the aesthetic of what we're used to, and that's what the cameras have been striving to do. Now, there's also been a push to go into kind of hyperrealism, into more sharp imagery, higher frame rates, that kind of idea, sharper lenses and things. So again, it's an aesthetic thing. You got to decide what you want to do and what you want things to look like. So what happens is, if we open up the shutter so that there isn't a virtual shutter, and they don't have a shutter, but they're virtually acting as a shutter. So if we go to, let's say, 360 degrees, so they like open up, we can get rid of these scan lines that you'll see like on televisions, or if there's these kind of dimmable LEDs that are causing problems on your actual location. So, and what that does is it usually it injects some more motion blur, because it's exposing a bit longer, so you can see kind of more of a motion blur per frames. Again, depending on how many frames per second, higher frame rates will have less blur, and so on. So that's a great solution to fix that kind of a thing. But the better solution is to ensure that you have lights that don't flicker, and that you have continuous lights that you can control and that work properly. So again, the LED lights that we have through our library partners, those are dimmable, and they offer both color temperatures. And that will take us into our next area. So what are the types of artificial lights for video? There's 4 main types of lights. We have tungsten, based on classic light bulbs, and what those will generally look like. Different types are out there, and I'm just going to grab a demo of one. So again, 4 main types. So the tungsten light is a very traditional type of light. So we have these types of lights. So this would be, this one's called a redhead. It's 1,000 watt in this case, and it's a tungsten-based light, and it's what you kind of expect, like the old type of kind of lighting, and it's yellowish in color, and we plug it in, and it gets very hot. So that's the whole thing with the tungsten lights. They're just like light bulbs. They get hot because that's how they work. That's the technology it's based on. So again, it's an older technology, but you know, it's great. And similarly, we have HMI lights that have a big bulb in them. They get hot as well. Now the difference with them is that they use a specific type of light. So these are the number 2, the HMI. They use a specific type of light that creates a daylight color temperature. And again, this will make more sense shortly. Then we have fluorescent lights, and fluorescent lights can cause a real big issue. They're a more recent addition into the continuous film lighting scenario, and they can be pretty low cost, but the key is to still get ones that are designed for film. So, you know, they don't have to be, you know, this kind of a unit here. This is from a company called Impact, and they're pretty low cost. I think they're about $100, so similar to like an LED. But the thing is, these tubes are specific color temperatures, and they're also won't flicker. So sometimes you'll see, like in a house, if you have, usually, you know, like in a basement or something, let's say you have fluorescent lights, they'll tend to flicker. They might be like on the green side, but these are again designed to be either tungsten or daylight. They're not green and they don't flicker, and that's really important. So they're a little bit more expensive maybe than just putting a regular fluorescent light, but not that much if you think about it, $100. You can spend $20,000 on, you know, KinoFlow is a really big brand. They have big banks. They have like 4 banks and 8 banks of lighting. And the nice thing about the fluorescent lights is they start to get into a very soft light. So they don't have a big throw in terms of the distance they can get, but they're a very nice soft light that can, you know, add a nice look. So these ones, they don't get hot. And I think that's the whole beauty, is that you can actually, you know, put something together with these, and I can just put it here to my face, and you can see that it's pretty close, right? I can go a little bit further away, but it's a very gentle light. It's not burning out, and it just kind of fills in. This is a very typical kind of light for, you know, like interviews. I'll usually put these close to people. And then it's a nice soft light. It gets rid of shadows. It's a very soft light. You know, you can do different effects. So even like from below, you can, you know, give a nice softness. So it's a really good, robust light. I like to use it a lot. And again, not too expensive in terms of what's available. Then we have the LED. So these use diodes to create light. So they're LED. And there's basically individual little lights that form like in a square. There's all these little light bulbs, and they together output the total LED light source. So that's a great type of source, and it's a great use for light. And that looks like, I'm actually glad I got some of these to demo, because it's then you can get an idea of what all of these types look like. The HMI again looks very similar. The HMI, I should mention, they usually have a ballast, or they have to have a ballast to stay keep the frequency to film frequency. So that's always important. So the LED lights are just like this, and you can see there's individual LED, the diodes that together create a light. They can be pretty harsh, and usually there's like softening plexiglass that goes on top. That's how, with the LED lights that we have there from a brand called Newer. They're about 1 square foot, so 1 foot by 1 foot, and they give a really nice soft light. So similarly, so this you'll see is dimmable. So look, I can go brighter and I can go darker, but you'll see no flicker, because these are designed to work with film lights. Whereas if I got maybe like a cheaper type, it won't work as well. And now I can also change the color temperature. So this is daylight, and I can make it basically yellow, which would be tungsten, right? And I can dim it as well, right? So again, this kind of an accent just off the side can be pretty nice. Just, you know, filling in my face, puts a little bit of warmth. I can play with it like that and adjust how much we want. So now it's a bit brighter, right? And it's a nice tool, and it could be, this little small LED can be a really portable use of fill. So again, LED lights, you want the ones that are designed for film, for continuous lighting, and that don't flicker. The nice thing about LED lights is because they don't need a lot of power, so they're all usually battery powered unless you get into a higher unit amount. But the ones at the library, same thing, they're battery powered, so you can charge them. You don't need to plug into power anywhere, and that's very convenient. So when you're doing a shoot, one of the biggest problems or time consuming things is finding outlets, putting electrical cords down, finding outlets, doing that whole song and dance of trying to figure out, how to do everything. So that could always be a problem. So the last, numbers 3 and 4, low heat, great lights to work with. They're the most modern ones, the newest ones. Tungsten's, very traditional, just like using light bulbs. I still love using light bulbs. I'll put them in the background. And then the HMI, more of a specialized light that, generally most of us won't necessarily work with, but they're strong, very punchy light. They give you a lot of light from a distance, and oftentimes you'll see those blasting through windows. Let's say at in a church setting or something, when they're trying to light this massive interior, they'll put huge, massive 20,000 watt HMIs outside to light it. Okay, so here again, just a note on this flicker. Tungsten lights tend to have no flicker issues. Fluorescent and HMI lights require ballast. So that's why the specialized fluorescent and HMI lights are required to make sure they don't flicker. And then LED lights need to be designed to dim. You don't want to dim them through a board if they're non-dimmable. And that's what happens, I think, with some of the theatrical settings, or they're not really purpose-built theaters, but they're kind of meeting rooms that have theater lighting in it, or even sometimes like restaurants. So you can't dim because they'll actually cause a flicker. So they're non-dimmable, and that means they just need to be on full. So that's a great solution as well. Color temperature. We've said this a few times now. So color temperature is the temperature of light, and it's measured in Kelvin units. What does that mean? So tungsten light bulbs and candles are 3,200 degrees Kelvin. They're warmer. Daylight and the sun is at about 5,600 degrees Kelvin. So these are approximations. We just kind of set things at 3,200, 5,600, and it works in that range. Sometimes you'll see a light and it says, hey, this is a 5,400. So that's what that means. Or it might say it's 3,600. Sometimes light bulbs actually give you the Kelvin readings now, which is really exciting. So what does this all mean? So basically, tungsten light bulbs were designed to replace gas lights, candles, which were warmer, on the warmer spectrum. So tungsten bulbs were designed to emulate fire, candle, gas lights. And that's why we're so used to that warm kind of sense of 3,200 degrees. The sun outside, even though we look at it as yellow and we paint it yellow, we draw it as a big yellow circle, it's actually emitting blue light, the cooler 5,600 degree light, or it's kind of in the middle of the spectrum if you look at this particular chart, right? So, okay, so that 5,600, and then there's like the cool white in between, right? That kind of idea. And the sun gets all sorts of reflections and shadows and everything. So it mixes with all the color palette of the earth. And then you don't really notice that it's this kind of a blue light because it's bouncing off of yellowish trees or bark that's brown, and the grass and the water and everything. Different times of the year give different kind of emotions. Sometimes in the winter you'll notice that it looks really cool outside. There's a cool light because there's not a lot of reflection of other colors. So just the snow. And the snow will just give you that really blue, super bluey day because the sun is blue. And then, in other times in the fall, you'll feel that it's really warm because you get so much warm color reflection from leaves. So this is the psychology, because we're used to thousands of years of living with fires, our only light source, and then candles and things like this, that we still have a kind of a nice, we have this desire to, see these kind of fire lights. So we still make tungsten warm lights. And psychologically, there's been studies that warmth kind of emits that home feeling. It emits like the nighttime, that there's lights on in the house in the nighttime, and so on. So it's always good to use those tungsten bulbs to create that sense of night, whereas the outside light can still be your daylight. That could be the sunlight, or that could be the moonlight and things like that. So color temperature is really cool. Now we can shoot with the same color temperature, so we can put the camera at 3,200 degrees, then and use 3,200 degree tungsten bulbs, and then that light will look natural. It won't look yellow. It's going to look pretty natural, just like what you're seeing right now on me. This is a daylight. I have some window light, daylight. This is pretty natural lighting on my face. There isn't any kind of warmth. It's pretty neutral. And the camera is set at 5600, and the lighting is set at 5600, and I have windows coming in that are 5600. But if I put something else on, I can end up with, like a yellowish light. And I think, there's a tungsten light bulb. I showed you a bit of the yellow, but I do have a regular light bulb here way in the background of the studio. And if I turn this on, see, that shows up as yellow because that's tungsten, and I'm rated at 5600 for daylight. So you can see this accent that now the background has a little bit of warm yellow tungsten, so we can have mixed color temperatures. And I think that's always a really exciting way to do some filmmaking, is to have these kind of mixed color temperatures and to make that work. So that's on the color temperature side. Okay, so 3-point lighting, what is this? This is, we've been talking about this now a few times, and it's really a key thing to lighting a subject. And it's a really great tool for documentary interviews because it's a quick way to assess how to light the subject, how to make it work. And it consists of 3 lights, as it says, as it insinuates. It's 3-point lighting. So number 1 is the key light, so that's the main light. Number 2 is the fill light, secondary light, usually in the direct opposite corner to the fill light. And then we have something called the backlight, and it's like a separation light. And that's used to separate what's behind me. So this is the idea here. So right now I have a key light that's coming to me here. I have a bit of fill light that's actually coming just like next to it. I can actually have a little bit more fill light from here, but there's a bit of reflection here from this monitor. And then we would have this bit of a separation light. In this case, it's that desk lamp in the back that, as you can see, it separates from my head what would just be a dark background. So that's that backlight or separation light. Typically that backlight will also kind of get thrown a little bit on the back of my neck, but there is a bit of happening through this window here. 3-point lighting, it's a great tool, very important to utilize, and it's a really fast way to do documentary interviews. And this is what a diagram would look like. And there's some percentages in terms of the power output of each light. So we look at the key light, 100%. That's really the main light, and it's usually, to an angle, 45 degrees from the camera. So it's a bit of kind of the side. Generally, the most aesthetically pleasing type of lighting is not front, like straight on. So even right now, you see I have no lights in front of me. Typically, I know there's a lot of that idea. People have like the ring lights and putting like that light in front. I like to keep, a more dramatic lighting look. So, I have it from the sides, both sides, and from the back, and generally you don't have a lot on the front. The only exception is if you have a really minor small light, as you can put a little bit of a lot of cinematographers like to do that, is put a little bit of eye light, just a little bit of twinkle, making sure that there's light in the eyes. Right now I have that from the window, so it's almost kind of a front light, but it's still to the angle. But you want to always make sure you can see the eyes, because you don't want them to be dark trenches of shadow. So that little eye light is really important. The twinkle in the eyes is, a lot of cinematographers will always look for that. And it's, you want to really be sure of why you're not doing that, because it could be really disconcerting to see like a face with dark pits of black shadow in where the eye sockets are. Okay, then we have the fill light. So that's another 45 degrees. And that's at half the power of the key light. So it just fills in the shadows. So again, same here, you can see I got this key light really bright here, right? And there's a little bit of fill from the other window here, just filling in a little bit, so I'm not in total shadow, right? So you can see this is double than this. That's key to fill. Then the backlight, it can be, weak, it could be strong, different exceptions, and that's usually up at the top, about 20%. I sometimes run with a backlight that's even the strongest. If I want a really harsh, like, rim around the head and stuff. And that's, again, a style. But this chart gives you those basics to get started, how to do a quick interview or how to do a quick narrative setup. This is how we do it. 3-point lighting, great tool, really a long-standing type of practice. And then we play around with it. We say, okay, let's not have a fill light. Let's just have a backlight. Let's have a really strong backlight. And then you know the rules, and then you can go around and you can break the rules and, think about, how that's going to work and the best way to achieve everything in that scenario, right? So that's a great tool. Okay, so let's go back and look at this. So I wanted to reiterate this. So we have this 180-degree rule. We talked about it last week, and that's for camera movement, right? So you want to create this imaginary axis, and this also helps with figuring out your lighting. So if you know where the camera is going to be based on this kind of an axis point, then you know where you should or you shouldn't put your lights. So you can see right now behind anywhere where these cameras are, behind these cameras is a pretty good safe spot to have your lights, and that could really be where your key is. And then the backlight can be a little bit trickier. So, reiterating this important rule, 180-degree rule, that really helps shape, how we can light things too, and where we want to position things. So think about that as well. I know it's a lot of things to think about, but it becomes more and more natural, and you just kind of intuitive, and you go through it. And again, remember, what you see is what you get. If it's something looks weird in your monitor, it's weird. So, fix that. And a big problem, it happens a lot still. I'm sometimes struggling with, even on like live events and things, but you'll have things like, there's like, see what happens if I just put like this, I get this weird shadow. There's just something in the way. So always look at that. Is there something weird? Is there like a piece of furniture? Is there a lamp? Is there something that might cause a bit of a shadow on the face that you can't control? So try and always put your lights around things that don't get obstructed by shadows. And that could be really important, because sometimes in a building it could be like a pillar or a post, and you have to work around those shadows and post areas to make it look beautiful, and to see how that goes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have a couple of samples here. Let me just go to advanced here. Should be able to. Save. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, this is a documentary that I shot called Craigleith Fossils, and I wanted to just go forward here and kind of look at, these kind of interview shots.
Fossils. The term fossil comes from the Latin word fossa, which means something like a hole in the ground. And it has come to mean the preserved remains.
Okay, so let's look at these two shots. So I got this one here. So this is an interview subject, and we talked now about, so beginning aesthetically, we talked about shot composition, rule of thirds. So you can see if I break this down, he's on that left side. His head is in the intersecting point of the rule of thirds. If we put two lines vertically and two lines horizontally, his head will intersect there, then his body proceeds down. And then opposing that, I have some fossils next to him. So to try to fill it up with some interesting, background areas and spots. So, that's it's a great tool to use and to figure out, how to best achieve this kind of a look. So now let's look at the 3-point lighting. So what I did here is there is on the left. So this was kind of spatially dictated. It's not a very large room where this interview is filmed in. So on the left, there's the key light. On the right, I did a bit of a fill light, and I played a bit with some color. So the idea was that all the fill and on the fossils, there would be a little bit of a red light to give it this kind of a look that this kind of adventure, archaeology, just a hint of red. So that's intentional. It's not a mistake. So this is where we get into playing with color temperature. So the camera is daylight balanced. Then I have the key light there. I have the fill light, and just put a bit of the bit of red, kind of twinkle there through on the side. And now then there's the backlight. So there's a separation, backlight on the shoulder, and that's like from the back on the left, screen left, behind the camera, behind the frame there, edge of frame. There's a light from the top kind of coming down and just gives it a bit of separation. The good thing is his clothing is a different color in the background, so there's already a nice separation. It's pretty clean with that. But that rim, you can see the back of his neck gets lit with that backlight. So again, 3-point lighting used in a pretty standard way, but with a bit of the difference is putting a little bit of that red to make you have that idea of this adventure, this kind of Indiana Jones type thing, that there's this molten lava, uh, billions of years of archaeological fossil type history. So it's really neat and fun to play with those kinds of themes and seeing what can be done. Now, here's the thing, and we talked about shot angles, is that then we can make another one. So I had 2 cameras running. Here's the corresponding close-up. So you can see again that key light on the side, the red on his left and our screen right, a bit of that red tint coming onto the fossils, and then again working with the rule of thirds, keeping the same composition, and then having a kind of a corresponding angle, a complementary angle. So it's 2 cameras, not the same camera, but 2 cameras to create these 2 different angles. And and that's a nice way to do an interview, I think, in my opinion. Okay. Then let's see. I think I have
older than 10,000 years is a fossil.
Now we come to understand.
Okay, so here's the next interview subject. So again, it's a not the easiest room, but I wanted to use this window that I thought was interesting, and I wanted to emulate what we're seeing kind of in the window here. So I did the key light as if it's coming from the window, but that's again on the right, the strongest light. You see that red now is on his, it's just the kind of the direct opposite of what we saw in the other shot. So his fill light is that red, and then there's a bit of a backlight to make sure we separate his black shirt. So you can see that light kind of highlighting on his shirt. And then here's the
worm
third person.
burrows or trails in the mud, and they show more behaviors: plowing through the mud, scavenging for food, unfortunately.
Okay, so same idea here. So he's, we got that. It's really the direct opposite angle of the first gentleman. So here again, the key light from his left, that red fill light coming from screen left. Sorry, from the key lights from the right, fills from the left, and then a bit of the backlight, and you can see the collar gets illuminated to try to separate that collar from the background of the mantle and the fossils. So just working on what's available in the space and trying to make something interesting looking and comfortable in this kind of a scenario. So that's a good idea of the 3-point lighting and how that can work to make that, to achieve that. And here I should be able to get to his close-up.
And died, left no fossil record at all. So we're very lucky to be able to find any fossils at all in the grand scheme.
Okay, so there's his close-up there. So you can see again that it's kind of a closer view of that key light, very bright. The fill light is about half, a little bit of reddish, and then the backlight is helping with our shoulders there. Continuing to work with the rule of thirds, and that can work in quite a nice way to achieve what we're looking to get in that kind of a scenario. And I'm just going to move forward here. I think there's a insert happening here.
And these are a particular group of cephalopods called nautiloids, which inhabited long conical straight shells. Cephalopods is a group that includes the modern octopus, the modern squid. So these are fascinating.
So you see, like, just matching the idea here of, what we see and how it works. So that's an idea of, just a rough idea of, what a documentary can look like, and I just pop up another one here with some 3-point lighting. going to get a play bar up here for us, and let's go right to it. Okay, so here, this is another documentary, and
for me, it was pretty important because
so this lighting here, this same kind of idea. So we have that the key light, we have a fill light, and we have the backlight over the shoulders to separate from the background. So you can see that's working in that kind of a manner. And then going forward here. So here's another interview. Same idea here. So again, that the key light on the right, a little bit of fill light, and this was designed to have a much harsher shadow scenario, and then the backlight, just because kind of more like this action movie idea. It's about the history of the longest regiment in Canada, the Queen's York Rangers, and just giving it that drama and that kind of a look. So here's another interview, right? So that idea, and you can see again, rule of thirds, playing with that bright key light, a little bit of fill, but leaving a lot of nice shadow there, making sure the eyes still have a twinkle. There's that eye light, and then that backlight, the rim light to separate the background around, so that can again, separating the subjects from their backgrounds, I think is a really crucial ingredient, and that helps things work well in that scenario. And then same idea, if sometimes, just want to see if I can get to this outside interview here.
colors that look good in sort of an Art Deco sense.
So then an exterior, now we're trying to look at, okay, where's the sunlight? So trying to find an area with a little bit kind of shadow cover, so it's not too harsh. Putting a light on the screen right again, so matching the concept always that I'm lighting the key kind of from screen right. Typically a lot of people, from screen left here, typically a lot of people will put their key lights kind of on that opposite end, and I like to put kind of a blast from the side and leave a little bit of shadow, because I usually find that the other area, the negative space on the screen right, will have some brightness to it. So I kind of want that kind of bright, bit of shadow back to bright, so a bit of a kind of a scale. And then, trying to use this sunlight to use as the backlight. So this was just with one light, but using actual natural light to reflect and create that 3-point lighting. So you can still look at it as the same thing outside, as you might just need a reflector or one light, but you can use the atmosphere and the natural lighting of the sun and reflections that the sun's making to help you achieve your 3-point lighting. So that can be done as well in that kind of a scenario. And I think that's always a really interesting idea there. I'm just finding another video here. I'm just going to pull one up here quickly. And we'll just look at some more lighting here. Okay, so here's a film called The Jazz Man. This is the cinematographer is Boris Moisovsky, CSC, ASC, and he shot this it's been about 10 years, I think, when we did this film. But here's kind of this idea of the tungsten, and this is just a still frame for the thumbnail. With this idea of this tungsten, and then you get this warmer light, kind of in the concert atmosphere and what it can do. But let's just have a look at, there's some nice lighting in this film. And we looked at a bit of this for the movement last week too, with some of the dolly shots. Okay, so this should be here's a night scene. And again, how do you work with that. And now you're just looking at a moonlight beam, and this is kind of where you start to go, okay, what is the 3-point lighting? So if we kind of look at this, we got this key light from the window coming in here. This gives us a nice backlight as well. And then we're gonna okay, so that's it's a big like oneer, we call them. And here, let's get into this kind of interior here, and hopefully I want to get here where we get into this interior of a house. Okay. Here's like a kitchen interior. So same idea here. So, where's our key light? We're identifying, here we go. We got this nice key light here. We have the key light happening here. We have a bit of some backlight here to separate our characters. And that's it. We're really just kind of focusing and using these shadows. We're going to get to some close-ups here of each character. Okay, so there's that angle here. So again, you see the nice key light here, little bit of fill on the side, but mainly just using this key light here. And then this nice backlight here to separate his shoulder from what would be the background. Okay, and then here's the corresponding close-up to cut to. So you can see it's matching. So we got that key light here. Again, you get the nice eye lights happening here and some good separation around the back here so that she's not part of the background. That's also the placement of the actor, making sure that they're not right in front of something that's totally dark. And you can see we're continuing the complementary. So that key light is there, and it continues here, and they're having their argument back and forth. Right, and you can see, like, again, that making sure that she's in an area that you can see around her. He's got this key light coming back here, but we got this outline on this side, so that he's not in darkness here. So that's a play kind of on this on a key light on his face from a side profile to make sure we can see him. Okay, and you can see again, so we got the stairs here playing with this key light here, where it's his brightest. We got the fill on this side, we got the shadow here in the middle, and then we got these backlight helping us to differentiate his shirt from the background. Okay, so that's fine. It's going to move forward here a little bit. This is kind of, again, in like a bar setting, a lot of, what's happening here. So you can see a lot of backlight, a little bit of fill, but lots of shadows, right? So this mood of the bar, these tungsten practicals, as they're called, right on the tables, giving us that nice warm light. Here's kind of the movement in action and the dolly move around. Right, so that's all great. These kind of scenarios again. Right, so again, keeping nice big key light there. You can see a little bit less shadow in this particular scene, different looks. But again, this is that backlight, and then the backlight's hitting his head here, really using these lights to do multiple things. And I think that's really key, is once you start, lighting the scenario. So this is really, as you can see, you can take, any kind of your favorite films, your favorite scenes, from, and really go back. You can look at things that you've done and look at, okay, well, what was I trying to do there? And it's a good exercise as well to look at your own work, but then study some of the films out there that you like and enjoy, and think about what the cinematographer is doing for the lighting. Is there 3-point lighting, or there's always something. There's always some sort of lighting. There's always a key light. You got to have some sort of lighting. Like I said, there's no such thing as no lighting, right? So that's why today's topic, lighting, really important to explore, consider, and think how you can use it in your films, whether they're documentaries or narrative films. Documentaries, because the subjects are sitting, it tends to be easier to get that 3-point lighting in, because you can set it up, it's there, they're not walking around. When it comes to narrative films, it's a lot trickier to figure out, okay, the character might be walking around the whole room, and how do you set that up? But generally, in narrative films, you still see where people kind of walk, then they stop somewhere to do a talk, and that's also to get that really nice lighting at times. So, when you see those beautiful shots, specific films, and they're stopped and they're talking, because they can be in this beautiful lighting for that moment. It's much harder to have lighting that kind of, keeps going through the whole scene. But we talked about movement. You can have that steady cam shot that you need to go through, and then sometimes you have to make some exceptions. There might be kind of ugly parts in some of the lighting that have some shadows, and that's okay, as long as you're still thinking about the key moments that we're getting some good lighting we can see. And the main thing is to make sure that we can identify what's happening. So if we can't see it, if it's that dark, that could really be a problem. So that's really the key, is make sure that you have the exposure, enough lighting to expose with, and then everything comes from there. And then you want to have those ideas of, what color temperature, do you want to have mixed color temperatures? How's it helping to tell the story? Is it a little more shadow, less shadow? And that tells different things. So you have to decide, is it fitting the story, the type of lighting design you're using, or is it not necessarily fitting that story? So is it really bright, but it's a dark, scary movie? Dark, scary movies should be darker and more shadow filled, right? And then something brighter, a comedy, we don't usually go into something really dark. And then what is the documentary? What's the story? How can it help the story? You saw that I used some red light to help with the fossil film. And then I did really darker kind of action movie, greenish hints for the Swift and Bold one about the military history film. So always using these ideas, the color, the types of lighting design, to make it all work for your lighting and design. So again, thanks for joining me. My name is Tom Sternad, lead digital artist of the Creative Space Project. Want to thank all our partners in this project, Canada Council for the Arts. Then we have our library partners, where you can access lighting and the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera, Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, Wasaga Beach Public Library. You can rewatch this right after we're done, and be sure to join us next week. We have our final of 4 weeks of the Cinematography Masterclass, and we'll be continuing our journey and ending it off there. So again, look forward to seeing you again next week and in other courses, and have a great rest of the day. Take care.